So the title of the shir is How to Transform Purim into a Day of Spiritual Growth. Ready there? 1 minute. Thank you. The shir has been kindly sponsored Leilu Nishmas David ben Tzvi Yehuda and David ben Chaim Modcha. The Shomas should have an aliyah. So just by way of introduction, the Torah experience of life, I find, is one of many mixed emotions. If you had to focus on all the different experiences and emotions of the Torah on one day, or in one moment, you would have to equally, at the same time, mourn the loss of the Beis HaMikdash, so feel extremely, sad about that we don't have the Beis HaMikdash. At the same time, you would have to be celebrating and joyful and ecstatic over the Nisim that Hashem had performed, whether it's Chanukah, whether it's Purim, whether it's any other period of history where Hashem saved us from our enemy, whether it's Yetzias Mitzrayim. Which of course is not humanly possible to do. You cannot hold so many mixed emotions in one go. Which is why it is a great chesed Hashem that Hashem had provided for us what's called the Ma'agal Hashana, which is the 12 months of the year of the Jewish calendar, where we have different Yomim Tovim spread out throughout the year, different times throughout the year, and each of those times are meant to be the focus on a particular aspect of the Torah. So as an example, we have Tisha B'Av, and we have the 3 weeks that build up to Tisha B'Av. That doesn't mean to say that for the rest of the year we don't bother with mourning the Beis HaMikdash. Of course we do. We mention it in davening all the time. We are supposed to conduct ourselves with a certain amount of reservation because of the Churban that we think of course. But we don't have to live with the feelings of sadness intensely all the time. We're allowed to listen to music throughout the year, etc. So by having different Yomim Tovim throughout the year, it allows for us to focus on a particular theme during that time and use that time as an opportunity for spiritual growth and connection that comes unique to that particular experience. So I like to describe going through the year as going up a spiral staircase. So every year you go around the same 12 months of the year, or 13 in a leap year. But essentially what you're doing is you're going through the same cycle of Yom Tovim. You're going round the year. But if you go up a spiral staircase, every time you go round, you're hopefully going round one level higher. Another year of growth, another year of life experience, another year of maturity of life gives a person a different sense of perspective, a different experience, and allows for a person therefore to approach the Yom Tov fresh. Even though we did it last year, we did it the year before, but we're going to approach it fresh and different and try and maximize what we can get out of it. So in this year, obviously, we're going to focus on Purim. I remember in Yeshiva, there was one of the staff, one of the Anhala said to me, he quipped, he said, if Chazal hadn't instituted a Purim, then the yeshivas would have certainly instituted a Purim. One day a year, let the Bachram sort of let their head down. And there's obviously legitimacy to that. Yeah, it's a good thing to do, to have a bit of a let your hair down day every now and again. But obviously, notwithstanding the value of that for yeshiva Bachram perhaps and for youth, as mature adults, we want to maximize what we can out of Purim. And that's why I want to try and spend a bit of time today sharing some ideas which I feel could really make the difference to a person's experience of Purim. It's not about not having fun. Of course, Purim is a day of tremendous simcha, and one should engage with all the different elements that there is of Purim to have simcha, but it has to be a meaningful day as well, and that's what I want to really focus on. Before we even get there, I want to say, there's a purely practical difficulty when it comes to Purim that I find. It's an extremely busy day. And on one day, you have to balance a number of things. So there's all the practical logistics in terms of, delivering all the shlachmanas and the teachers and the rebbes with your kids and all the rest of it. And of course, you want to make sure all your family members, whether they're young adults or spouses, etc., or listening to, have heard the Megillah, right? So you have to fit that into the day. There's obviously the priesthood, the prep. There's looking after kids. And on top of that, so besides the purely practical business of a day, you want to have a spiritual Purim, so you want to try and connect, you want to try and do stuff, that are meaningful, you want to daven, you want to learn, you want to do things on Purim which are spiritually uplifting. And not only are you going to be one of the busiest days of the year and with all this great ideal of spiritual connection, but it's also, you want to be happy. It's the happiest day of the year, right? You want to be happy, you want to be besimcha. So it's quite a lot for a person to expect of themselves, and I do struggle with this on some level. I'm just being honest. It is a lot, and all we can do ever in these situations is to try, and try we must. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to point people in the right direction, but of course, no one is expecting perfection ever. I want to try and focus on three aspects in particular. The three aspects of Purim that I want to focus on are mitzvahs, number one. Number two, dveikus, and we'll get to explain that obviously. And number three is tefillah. So let's start with the basics. Someone who's looking to be a good Jew on Purim, someone wants to do the basics right, you want to grow from Purim, then it has to be that one doesn't disregard any of the regular chiyuvim and mitzvahs that are incumbent upon us as Orthodox Jews, as Frum Yidden, that you have to do on a daily basis. One cannot just disregard them because, it's Purim anyway. And unfortunately, sometimes, and it could be subconscious, but sometimes people sort of exchange and they say, well, today's Purim, so therefore, and somehow the other stuff that normally is important may not be as important. So I just want to highlight a few things I'm sure in the audience that's present in this room is not relevant for, but you never know who's listening, and I want to make sure everyone is clear about this. There are just very basic mitzvahs, which, as I say, are important for everyday Judaism, everyday Yiddishkeit, which, because of Purim and the business of Purim and the madness of Purim almost, they can become a bit less important for some people. So, for example, davening Shachris on Purim morning is no different davening Shachris Purim morning than every day of the year, right? And the person has to make sure whatever had happened the night before, however drunk they may have become the night before, whatever partying they did the night before, they have to do Shachris Purim morning. It's an important thing to do. Not only that, but the Kriya Shema has to be kept to as well. There's a time for saying Kriya Shema, the latest time for saying Kriya Shema. Purim is no different. One has to make sure, as early as it is, that one says Shema before that time. Mincha. During a normal year of Purim, it's slightly more difficult. This year, hopefully with it being before Shabbos, it's easy at least to remember to daven Mincha, that's for starters. But one has to be careful that one isn't overly drunk when davening Shemona Esrei. You have to be on a level of Omid Lifnei HaMelech. You have to be able to talk sensibly, and one has to be careful with that. Now, how you work it out logistically, the best advice, and I'm planning on doing this, is to start your Suda as early as possible. Anyway, halachically speaking, you're supposed to really kind of have it in the morning if you can. But okay, not on a normal year, that's more difficult. But if you can start at 12 o'clock or whatever, you've got plenty of time to have a good Suda, and still time to sober up at least a bit to come to Shabbos, like a mensch. I say that from Mincha, but I just mentioned now, Shabbos is important as well. I mean, the stories that go on every time there's a Purim on a Friday of people who unfortunately end up with Chilul Shabbos on some level, it's heartbreaking. There's no way in the world that Purim was intended to be a day where everything just goes out the window. One has to remember, there's chiyuvim, there's mitzvahs that one has to have every single day and every single week. You have to keep Shabbos the day after Purim just as much as you keep Shabbos the week before Purim. And therefore it's important to make preparations for that and to be dressed l'chvod Shabbos. So you might have fun on Purim, gesundheit, you dress yourself up, v'napechu, there's an inyan in it, of course, I try to as well. But Shabbos is Shabbos. Shabbos doesn't deserve Chil Shabbos. Shabbos doesn't deserve Zilzul Shabbos. One has to make preparations in their Purim day to make sure that they don't end up too close to Shabbos and transgressing on Shabbos. And the final point I'd say before we get into the themes of the day, the mitzvahs hayom, is the Ben Adam L'Chaveroi. And of course, within the atmosphere of joy and the atmosphere of having fun, people sometimes forget or become lax about simple, straightforward Ben Adam L'Chaveroi. One has to be careful to be sensitive to other people and watch what they say. And the same halachas of not saying hurtful things of Inas Dvarim that applies throughout the year, it applies in Purim as well. And even if you mean it as a joke because you're in high spirits and you think the guy's going to take it well, you must try and exercise every bit of caution that you have, that we're getting on with people, we're doing be'achdus, we're treating people well and nicely, we're not being insensitive, and we don't say hurtful things. So the whole of the Shulchan Aruch applies on Purim as much as it applies the rest of the year. So now let's address the three elements that I wanted to address one by one. Mitzvahs. I'm going to talk about the theme, one of the themes of the mitzvahs hayom of Purim, and I want to begin by saying the following. The fundamental yesod of doing mitzvahs is closeness to Hashem. Kirvas Hashem, closeness to Hashem. That's what mitzvahs are all about. And you look through Mesilas Yesharim, but he says it clearly in Perek Aleph. He writes as follows: when you look into the matter, you'll see. True wholesomeness is rak advekus b'Yisbarach, is dvekus, connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is what David HaMelech said when he said in Tehillim and Gimel va'ani kirvas Elokim li toiv. For me, closeness to Hashem is good. And I always say this mashal because I think everyone can connect it on some level. Everybody's going to have their own journey in Yiddishkeit. Everybody's going to have their own way of connecting to Hashem, and everyone's going to have their own amount and how they connect and when they connect, etc. But I think it's safe to say that Ne'il Yom Kippur is one of those moments where I think every Jew, on some level, has to connect to Hashem, whether you like it or not. The atmosphere, the build-up of the day, the davening, the tunes, it just gives a person the frame of mind and the sense of closeness, of connection to Hashem, when they realize, and the rabbi stands up and he speaks, and he says the gates are closing, and everyone gets that sense. And I can feel it now in my bones as I'm saying it. It's like there's a certain closeness of Hashem. Everyone gets about it. So you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about closeness to Hashem? It's that feeling. It's that feeling of sense of closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where between you and Hashem there's nothing. There's nothing in between you. You feel at one. And the truth is that lies behind all mitzvahs. As Mesilas Yesharim says, all the doing mitzvahs shouldn't be a tick box exercise. It should be a meaningful endeavor. It should be something that you connect to Hashem with. Now, we're all human. So to expect that of ourselves every single day with every single mitzvah, every time you tie your shoelace the right way, every time you say every single bracha, it's a tall order. There are tzaddikim out there who live like that. I certainly don't, and I'd like to, but it's a big ambition, and one has to be aware of what the ambition is. That we're trying to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as much as we can. But at least when it comes to mitzvahs which are not regular, when it comes to mitzvahs that are unique to certain times, that presents opportunity for real connection, because you can take the time to understand it, to prepare for it, to cherish it, because it only happens once or twice a year. And then when doing the mitzvah, you can focus on what the mitzvah is, on being present, and on connecting to Hashem. And one such mitzvah is the mitzvah of listening to Megillas Esther. We have a chiyuv from the Gemara. We have a chiyuv to listen to Megillah by night and repeat it by day. Now, there is a number of different experiences what one can have when listening to Megillah. There is a scenario that you sit through Megillah, especially in the night where it's just been Tanis Esther, and you're kind of waiting to get through it. You're waiting for it to be finished, and then you can go home, and you can have your meal. You can have, get into the real Purim, right? Once you've got the Megillah behind you. And either you're a person who likes to bang at Haman, or you're a person who gets annoyed about banging at Haman. But either way, that's what's on your mind. There's too much banging, there's little banging. the story of the Megillah, then I think it can really set the tone for a different type of Purim. That's point number one. Sameach, Choson V'Kala. Choson V'Kala come together, they want to build a new home. There's a wholesomeness there, there's a shleimus there, there's a completion there. And that type of shleimus is a recipe for simcha. Similarly, when we daven for the Beis HaMikdash to come, and we call the Beis HaMikdash Binyan Sholim, the v'holesome binyan, we say V'samchenu B'Binyan Sholim, because simcha is associated with shleimus. And Bali Musa also point to this. The real joy comes when a person is in service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in seeking shleimus and seeking to be wholesome. So the most important thing on Purim, when you're being happy and you're engaged in the atmosphere of Purim, and of course you're doing your drinking and whatever it is that you're going to use as a leverage to get into the spirit properly, one has to remain focused that ultimately the simcha should be a meaningful simcha. And I feel that part of this depends on sur merava asay tov, which is avoiding certain things and doing certain things. And just to mention too, when you're at the Sudas Purim, don't let the conversation or let the atmosphere be drawn to a low level of either inappropriate or litzonos or of a back and forth which is not conducive to where you'd think you would want to be if you were consciously aware in that moment of the Baruch Shalom is sitting there, you want to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's just not conducive for growth. You should try and keep it elevated. And second of all, dance. Dance and sing to songs of dveikus. You know, we all know the refrain, Nichnas yain yotza soid. Yain comes in, soid comes out. What does that mean, the secret comes out? It means that wine, becoming drunk or alcoholically affected, allows for the barriers that are normally with us to go down. It allows a freedom. But you know what the freedom is? The freedom isn't just to act out. The freedom is that the neshama, the tif arayin, that's desperate to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and all the time would connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu if not for all the different hang-ups that we have every day with the help of the Yetzer Hara. Purim is a moment where we can just express ourselves fully from the Shama level, and that will be expressed best, in my opinion, in my view, when a person has what to express it with. If you're walking around saying nursery rhymes, it's not going to be a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But if you have songs of dveikus which you connect to, pick them beforehand if you must. And I give some thought to it before Purim as to what I want in my pocket as on a list or in your mind, or just to be aware of them and dance to them and sing them and allow the moments of alcohol, the moments of Simcha of Purim to connect you to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I just want to mention one more point before I get into the last segment of Tefillah. I know we're running out of time here, which is, with all that we're saying, and it's lovely, and to some people it might sound quite idealistic. You have to remember, when there's never any purpose in trying too hard. What we're talking about here is we're pointing to truth, we're pointing to concepts which I feel would be helpful for a person to consider, and in as much as you're able to connect to them and as much as you're able to act on them good and well, but never is it worth it that these concepts or these ideas should make a person so driven and so intense about it that actually it causes difficulty. So, and I'll give you a simple example, right? So you might be all into your spirit and you want to really get into a certain song, as a stupid example, right? And there's people around you, but it doesn't work. It's not conducive. They don't want you to. You need to help with the kids. You need to do something else. Someone's asking you to be quiet. Whatever it might be, that might come at you from different angles, because we live in a world with other people and we have to respect that. And we have responsibilities we have to respect as well. Go with the flow. Don't don't try and force through these ideas or any ideas of growth on Purim because you want to have a ruchnistic Purim, you want to have a spiritual Purim at the expense of the people around you and the responsibilities that you have. You just got to try your best. That's all you got to do. And if you go with the flow, you'll be living with HaKadosh Baruch Hu more than doing anything else. Because you're accepting the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's why Hashem wants it to play out for you. So I just want to move into the last part of the Shir today, which is the Tefillah. And we all know, I'm sure we all know that Purim is the holy day, and our Rizal says that Yom Kippurim, and Purim is even holier than Yom Kippur. Of course, the day of the davening on Purim can be extremely, extremely effective. Never underestimate that. But I want to tell you something that this year I saw from Shlomo Brevda, from the Medrash in Esther Rabbah, Perik Yud, that actually more than just a nice idea on Purim that we davening was actually central to the whole nest of Purim happening. And the Medrash draws from the pasuk we quoted earlier, Sak va'efa yutzel rabim, when everyone put on sak va'efa, everyone put on sackcloth. The Medrash says, what, you think they just put on sackcloth? Of course they davened as well. They davened alongside the fasting, and the Medrash says, and there's other loads of rayas that Rosh Brevda brings, that the whole nest transpired because Klal Yisrael took to Tefillah. So Purim is a day of davening. And if you're practical with this, you can't really elongate your Shemona Esrei at night time. You've got Megillah coming up soon, you can't afford that. Shachris, you've got the same issue, you've got Megillah coming shortly after that. So I personally find that in the night time, once everything's settled, you've come home, you've had your thing to eat, whatever it is, you have time in your hands. You learn a bit, whatever you want to do, but you have time on your hands. I find that to be probably the calmest point of Purim. 9:30 at night, whatever it is, you've got your own space, you open a Tehillim or without a Tehillim and just daven HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because don't underestimate what can happen when you turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu sincerely with a real heartfelt request on Purim. It can make all the difference. Just one day of Purim. If you have other opportunities to daven, by all means use them too. So just to conclude, we're looking today in our share today, we're looking for ways to grow on Purim spiritually, and we pointed out a number of things which I just want to recap. So first of all, we said make sure to do the mitzvahs which one is regularly having to do, but particularly the mitzvahs hayom of Purim. Do it with the right focus, and we mentioned Megillah as one example where it can really set the tone. If a person approaches listening to Megillah not as just listening to a story, but really trying to experience Megillah, doing that can lead a person to real closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and as the Rambam says, can come with real and significant lessons that one can draw from the Megillah. The second thing we said is try to engage in the mitzvahs that we're doing over Purim with dveikus, with connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if one is going to drink or one is going to be dancing or whatever it is, do it through song and through focusing on service HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of being besimcha in a spiritual way and in a meaningful way. And the final point we said is daven. Don't let Purim go by without davening, whether it's for yourself, or for someone else, or for Klal Yisrael. Don't let Purim go by without davening. And of course, all we can ever do is try, and try we must. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu help us. We shall have a Purim Sameach, and all our tefillah should be answered. Shkoyach.